So welcome everyone. Like Sarah said, thank you so much for coming. My name is Shannon Barletti. I am a perfusionist with specialty care here in Philadelphia. I am a new grad, just like you guys. I've been a perfusionist. I took boards last year in October, so I definitely know what you're feeling right now and getting ready and everything. Before I was a perfusionist, I did work in healthcare. I was a nurse for 10 years. I work in critical care, so I have a lot of experience interviewing and also being on the other side, being an interviewer, both one-on-one and in peer interviews as well. So today we're going to get started and hopefully get you feeling like you're ready for these interviews. So just some objectives for you. I'm not going to read them to you, but what we'd like to do is kind of go over all the steps that you need to make sure that you're well prepared for any interviews that you may go on, answer some of your questions, and just really make sure that you're feeling a lot more comfortable. All right, so made it through perfusion school, you've done all your studying, you've passed your tests and everything, you've spent hours and hours looking for a job. You sent in your application and you heard back and you got an interview. Now what? First things first, don't panic. Interviews, I know, they seem to be these daunting, life-altering, incredibly stressful, important, intimidating situations. But the truth is that with a successfully executed plan, you can actually ensure that your interview is a success. Because at the end of the day, an interview really is just making sure that the job is a good fit for you and that you are a good fit for the job. So it's really about your employer getting to know you and you really getting to know your employer. So, like I said, there's things that you can do to prepare ahead of time. There's a lot of things you can do in the days and weeks coming up, and we're going to go through them. We're going to go through the things that you should do in the weeks and days leading up to it, the things that you should do the night before, and what you should also do afterwards. Organization is going to be really important. The more that you're organized and the more that you're well planned for this, the more it's going to decrease any anxiety that you may have about interviewing. Okay, so this is that initial to-do list that I was telling you about. This is the stuff that you're going to want to get started on right now if you can. I know you're really busy, but getting a jump start on these things will make you feel a lot more comfortable when it comes time to interview. So first, you're going to update and know your resume and your curriculum vitae. So some of you may be coming right out of undergrad and you may not have a very long employment history, and that's okay. That's where that curriculum vitae really comes in handy. I know that a lot of schools do have a student help center, and they can offer you some helpful tips and advice, and they can sit you down and help you with your resume and your curriculum vitae. You're going to want to make sure that it's clean, neat, and it's detailed, but it's also brief at the same time. You'll want to make sure that you have copies ready of that when you go for your interview. You want to sit down, compile a list of your strengths and weaknesses. Are you a fast learner? Are you somebody who really thrives under pressure? When you sit down and you write these strengths and weaknesses down and you kind of look at them every couple of days, when you go into your interview and you're faced with these questions, it's going to be a lot easier to answer if you've already sat down and thought of those things. Similarly, you want to take notes on your accomplishments and struggles that you've overcome. Again, you know, if you're coming right out of undergrad, that's okay. You just had a very long time in clinical, at least a year, 2 years, and you can really pull from that, and we'll talk more about that later. But you want to make sure that you write those down and you really start to become familiar with them. Know your professional goals, very important. What's important to you to get out of a job? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Start to really ask yourself those questions, and again, really important, write it down. Just for you, but it's going to really help you when you go to interview. Anticipate interview questions. We're going to talk more about that later, but that's also helpful. Select your professional interview attire, and we'll go over that as well. You want to make sure ahead of time that you have that go-to ready outfit that you know you put it on, it fits well, you feel great, and you can go in there confidently. Like we said, make copies of your resume and your curriculum vitae. Also figure out what you'd like to bring with you on the day of, whether it's a briefcase, a smart professional bag. You're going to want something with you, and we'll talk about different things that you may want to keep in there with you on the day of. And also, importantly, research the company or the hospital with which you're interviewing. You want to go in there with an idea of what this company is, what's their mission, what's their value, what are they about? Are they a big hospital? Are they small, teaching, community? You really kind of want to have an idea when you go in there. It shows you're really interested in the company and you're really here to be part of their team. Okay. This is more of the stuff that you need to consider closer to the day of your interview. Be mindful of having a clean, sharp appearance. Suit, you want to make sure it's clean, it's ironed. You has is your jacket in the back of your closet, maybe it's wrinkled up since you moved from school. Maybe it's at home and you need to have it shipped to you, or you need to go out and you need to get a new one. That's something you definitely want. You don't want to be worrying about that on your interview. You want to have it squared away. Have you been championing quarantine hair? I know I have. Maybe go out, get a haircut, make sure you're clean, organized. Your briefcase or your bag, you want to have that clean and organized too. You don't want to be opening it during your interview to hand over your curriculum vitae to the chief of Perfusion, and you're digging through a couple of iPhone chargers, maybe your headphones fall out. You want to make sure you only have the essentials that day. You want to make sure you have copies of your curriculum vitae. I personally like to carry a small amount of cash just to make sure. I want to have some gum, right? Maybe some tissues, just very basic, your keys, basic things that you need, but don't overpack it. You want to seem minimal, very put together. So research the commute to the interview and consider any traffic patterns. This is very important, especially if you're traveling to a hospital or a company in a city which you've never been to. You want to make sure you leave plenty of extra travel time, even up to an hour. Sometimes there's detours, parking issues, or even difficulty finding the location of the building or the office. For that reason, sometimes it's not a bad idea to take a trial run. If you have a little bit of notice ahead of time about your interview, maybe take a trip down a couple of days before, kind of scout it out, look, see about parking, find the building. Make good use of Google Maps or anything else where you can kind of get a street view and get an idea for where you might be going. Also important, make sure that you have the contact information of the person that you're interviewing day of to be sure if anything happens, at least you have that with you as well. Most importantly though, get plenty of rest the night before and give yourself plenty of extra time to get yourself together the morning of. Because again, all of this is really just about putting your best foot forward, being yourself, and seeing, is this the job I want, and am I a good candidate for this position? And the best way to put yourself in the best position for a successful interview is to make sure that you're well rested, organized, and put together. Okay, so let's talk about some in-person interview considerations. Like we talked about, you want to make sure that you're professional, putting your best foot forward, but you also want to be comfortable. Some interviews, you may be taking a tour of the hospital or the campus. Other times, you may have a clinical observation component. You want to make sure that whatever you're walking into, you're going to be able to do so comfortably. You want to present a calm and confident demeanor. Don't get too casual. You want to show that you do have a personality, but at the same time, you don't want to talk to them as if they're one of your pals and you're out for dinner or something like that. Some interviews may seem to get a little comfortable, but always be very careful. Pay attention to your body language. A lot of people have some nervous things that they do. I particularly talk with my hands. I'm pretty thankful that you can't see them right now. But pay attention to the way that you're sitting. I would recommend not slouching, not seeming disinterested. You don't want to cross your arms across your chest. You want to present yourself in a way that you're interested and engaged in what's going on. Take your time in answering questions. And I can't state this enough and impose the importance of it enough. Don't think ahead in your head, oh my gosh, what are they going to ask me next? Did I answer that question right? I don't think this guy likes me. This guy, I'm not too sure. Take your time, really listen to what they're saying to you and think of how you want to respond. The first thing you think of right off the top of your head, you don't want to just blurt it out. Take your time, be an active listener, and give thoughtful, professional, confident responses. And again, be professional, but don't be afraid to show some of your personality. Okay. In today's world, this is definitely an important consideration. You may be asked for a virtual interview. Some companies or hospitals with COVID, we're switching more to Zoom, GoToMeeting, all of these things. So with that being said, that's a whole different ballgame. You want to make sure that you pick a private, quiet space. This is very important. You don't want to have the dog jumping on you, your roommate coming in with a bunch of friends laughing and yelling. If you have kids, try to find a sitter or maybe go to a friend's house or go to a quiet room where they know you really need to be present for this right now and you can't really talk to them. Be mindful of your background. I can't tell you how many times I've been on Zoom calls and in the background I'm looking at a complete mess. You don't want to, if you can help it, and you're going to be in your dorm room, try to find a blank wall. Even if you're seated on the ground up against a blank wall with your laptop propped up on a couple of computers, as long as you're just chest up, head high, and your background is clean in the background, that's okay too. You just want to make sure you pay attention to what's in the background. Virtual backgrounds are also a thing. You could look into one of those as well. Consider using headphones. So this goes into the whole equipment piece of it. You want to make sure that your laptop is functioning with the proper software and that the application works. You want to do a trial test run really of all of your equipment. Does my computer work? Is my microphone picking up my speech? Is my volume loud enough? Am I going to be able to hear them when they're talking to me? Grab a friend and do a mock interview in advance and try to test that software. Set up a Zoom meeting with a friend or set up a GoToMeeting and just make sure that what you're planning on is working. That being said, the day of, plan to start well in advance. Maybe your internet's not working. Maybe your computer decided to do an update. You really want to make sure that you're good to go from a technology front if you're going to do a virtual interview. Now we're going to take you through some of the questions you might be asked and some of the answers that you might want to think about considering when you answer. So some example interview questions you may hear. Tell us about yourself. So this is where that list that we were talking about in the beginning comes in handy. You want to know, so my name is Susie Smith and I went to this college as an undergrad. This is what I studied. I went to this perfusion school. You want to stick to those types of professional things when they're asking you about yourself. They may ask, what are some of your strengths? And don't be afraid to tell them. If you know that you are very independent and you really pick up on things quickly, don't be afraid to tell them. That's great. And likewise, you want to also have a list of your weaknesses too, because none of us are perfect. And certainly as a new grad, I know I have tons of weaknesses that I am diligent in working on. And you want to present that to the people that you're interviewing with, that you are aware that you have a lot to bring to the table, but also as a new grad, there's definitely stuff that you are really interested in working on as well. Start to think of why you chose this field. Why specifically did you choose this company or this hospital? If you're going to a big teaching university downtown, you want to be challenged by the intense, challenging cases there. You want a heavy caseload. You want to get really good experience in some of the different devices that they have there. So think of why you chose them and where do you see yourself in 5 years? And don't be afraid to tell them what you have planned for yourself. And again, Your goal is not to answer correctly, but answer thoughtfully and honestly. Again and again, the purpose of the interview is this a good fit? Is this where I want to work? Can I see myself working here? And from the interviewer's perspective, is this person a good fit for our team? Are they going to jump in and fit right in, and they're going to work really well, and they're going to be happy and want to work here? Okay. So interviewing as a new grad, I could tell you it's difficult and it's very intimidating. However, everybody that you're interviewing with has interviewed new grads. They've all worked with new grads, and they too at one time were a new grad. So there are some things that you can start to prepare in advance to really make sure that interviewing as a new grad works in your favor. Again, if you don't have that work experience, you really need to draw from your clinical experiences. You guys have done a lot in school. What type of cases have you done? Start to make a list. I've done AVR, MVR. I've done transplants. Maybe you've done heart transplants, lung transplants, liver transplants. Maybe you've done some VAD insertions. You want to start looking at, have you done cell saver, PRP? Have you done any ECMO? These are all the sorts of things that you want to highlight in your interview. What devices and equipment have you worked with? If you're going to a company and they say, we do a lot with interventional cardiology and we do a lot with balloon pumps. What's your experience with balloon pumps or Impellas? So start to make a list of those things that you've seen before, or maybe that you've gotten special training on with your school, because that is definitely very helpful. Especially as a new grad, can you think of a difficult situation in a clinical rotation that was difficult or challenging for you? When they ask this question, you want to think of a difficult or a challenging situation, but you should try to think of one in which you really learned something, or maybe you handled it particularly well. Do you have any special skills that you developed in other roles, such as academia, volunteer experiences? All of these life experiences too help you as a perfusionist. What we're doing, we're working with people, we're taking care of people. So all of that life experience, really try to pull that into. It helps to show a lot of your personality in your interview. Okay, so there, in the interview, there will come a point when they ask, do you have any questions for us? And I really strongly recommend that you create a list. Of course, there's stuff that you're going to want to know. And not only is it okay for you to ask, it's good for you to ask. It shows you're very interested, again, in either the company or the hospital. Some questions you may have might include, what type of cases do you do? How many cases do you do per year? How many surgeons do you have? How many staff members are on your team? Do you do ECMO, VADs, transplants? What are your average cases like? What's your call schedule like? That's important when you're considering if you're a good fit for this job and they're a good fit for you, right? And also, what are some of the qualities that your ideal candidate would possess? Is this a team where each member needs to function very independently? Is it a smaller team? Is it a bigger team? You want to find out. If they start describing somebody who sounds exactly like you may know, hey, this is a great job for me. Lastly, at the end, the follow-up, also very important. You do want to write a thank you letter, email. That especially in recent years has gotten a little different. Some people prefer to send emails, some people a small note. It's really personalized to you. But the point is, it's important that you do it and that you do it as soon as possible. You really want to do it later that afternoon or evening. If you're looking to do something a little more personalized, definitely as soon as possible. In that follow-up, you want to mention some specific things you discussed. Hey, Dr. Smith, it was really great to meet with you and interview with you this afternoon. I really liked that you have a large team that's really interested in teamwork, and that you do so many cases a year that would really challenge me as a new grad. Something specific that you talked about. You want to reiterate some of the qualities that you possess that would make you a great candidate, and then you want to just sign off sincerely. Not super long, not super brief. Thanks for meeting with me. Something thoughtful, professional, but just a thank you. And remember, this is remember me when you're reviewing your interview candidates. So I believe that's everything that I have to share with you guys. I know it's kind of basic and you may have already known a lot of this, but this is a great platform for you guys. I can answer any questions that you may have from a new grad perfusionist perspective. We also have Sarah and Courtney here, and they are from HR and recruiting. So if you have something that's a little bit more on the HR front, they can definitely answer it for you as well. So with that, we'll open it up to questions. So Megan would like to know, how many jobs would you suggest new grads apply to when first looking for a job? Sarah or Courtney?
Sure, this is a great question, Megan. Thank you for sending this. And while the question and answer window is open, please continue to submit your questions while we're talking and upvote for the ones if you have a similar question, and we'll make sure that we get in as many as we can. So Megan, with that question, when you say how many jobs would you suggest new grads apply to when first looking for a job, there's no set number that you should apply to. There's not a minimum. What you want to do is look at the areas where you want to live, the type of team and account that you want to work for, and submit those applications, knowing that there's certain times a year when it's more competitive than others, but you definitely want to make sure that you keep enough options on the table, which is very important. But there's really not a set number. I would suggest that you start applying to at least 3 to 5 positions that you know that you might be interested in, because once you start having those phone screens talking to those team members, you're going to start to eliminate some of those options. Also, with a lot of the positions, you might be traveling to interview, and you know that your days off are limited. So you want to make sure that the positions you're going to travel to interview for are ones that you're really interested in. But again, there's no limit that you should, apply to, but I would recommend starting with at least 3 to 5 jobs that you know for sure that you would want to live in that city possibly.
Romero asked a question, how early do you suggest students start applying for jobs? We have students apply anywhere from 6 months to a year in advance. We do recommend that just because you have to allow for travel time. You have to allow for additional interviews, and you want to make sure that you are working with your program directors to allocate time to go for the interviews as well.
Thanks, Courtney.
Would it be appropriate to mention that you have other offers during an interview?
I think from a team perspective and a manager perspective, it's always nice for them to know that you do have other interviews or offers on the table, because that can also help with their timeline. And it's good to be transparent. I don't recommend using it as leverage, but just to be honest and let them know, I'm really excited about this opportunity. I do have another offer on the table, and I wanted to give you an idea of what my timeline is. What is your timeline? I think it's appropriate when you do it in that sense. Absolutely. We want to know, what you're thinking, what other interviews or offers that you may have, so that we can give you a response to your interview in a very timely fashion too, as we know these are really important decisions that you're making.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Aswathi Nair asks, how can an Indian perfusionist get a job in European countries?
So it's a really great question, and I think in that case, we, since we are in the United States and we're not employing in Europe, we're not able to answer that specifically. What I can tell you that for an Indian perfusionist to get a job in the United States, it is required that you take and complete the boards here and have to graduate from an accredited school. Aswathi, I would recommend that you head to perfusion.com to see if they have some additional information, and then also check with some of the European boards as well. Most likely it's going to require that you are going to pass boards in the country that you're looking to have a job, to be employed with in Europe, just like it is in the United States. We do require that all perfusionists here have taken and completed the boards, and that means they have to graduate from an accredited perfusion school. So I would think that you would want to check into that in Europe as well. It's very common that you're going to have to pass the boards in another country as well. There's not a lot of reciprocity with perfusion.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sure. All right. What other questions do you have at this time? You know, anything from the recruitment process to positions that we may have open to, you know, how to prepare for the interview? We're here to help you out through this process.
Okay, do you have any advice regarding negotiating a starting salary for new grads?
You know, Shannon, I think you kind of recently went through some of this too, you know, with interviewing, and how did you handle it from just that, you know, real life perspective?
Sure. So for me, interviewing, I was, and maybe this isn't the right answer, but I will be very honest with you guys as if you're one of my friends I went to school with. So when I was interviewing in an interview process, I was very close with some of my classmates, and a lot of us were applying for jobs in a similar area. So we were very open with each other in terms of salaries that were being offered. We also looked on LinkedIn and Indeed and a lot of these other resources to kind of see what's the average salary in the location that we're in. And we looked, you know, at the lowest and the highest and the median. And from my experience, at least in the area that I'm in a big city here in Philadelphia with a lot of hospitals and a lot of different types of hospitals. It seems that for the type of hospitals, the big, busy teaching hospital in the city, all the new grads are being started at right around the same price point. And you might find that if you're at a smaller community hospital in the suburbs, that might be significantly less or in a different city. So for us, we were open with with each other in my class, and you know, people may not be okay with that, and that's okay too. But there's lots of resources like Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn to ask, you know, to get an idea of what the salary range is like in your area.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, Shannon, too. You know, you can take a look to see some of that information that's published as well from certain hospitals that do publish that information too. So you can take a look at that. And also, you know, when you're thinking of negotiating a starting salary, you know, if you are presented with an offer, you know, that is kind of your starting point to take a look at and to engage in conversation if you feel that you should be given a different amount, and to have that conversation openly and transparently with your recruiter, the person that extended that offer, so you can have those conversations. And I think that every situation is a little bit different. And Shannon pointed out something about the city, the type of hospital where it's located. So just like with any type of position, salaries are going to be driven by the market and the state and city in which the position is offered. So what one classmate might be offered in one city might not be comparable if it's in a different state or market than another city. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Also, things you want to keep in mind when you're looking at that starting salary is, you know, what's the flexibility? Am I going to be on call a lot? What does that look like? What is this in terms of work-life balance? You know, those types of things, and take that into consideration as well when you're making those negotiations. But I think most importantly is you want to be, you know, upfront and honest, but always coming from a place of respect and appreciation for the offer too. That goes a long way.
Yeah, and
I
Sarah,
agree with both of you. Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking to mention the work-life balance. Definitely huge. I know it's big for me, but I was also thinking it's important to consider the entire package too. So I can't keep my horn about specialty care enough, and I genuinely mean it when I say it. In my package, I get a lot more vacation time. My benefits are wonderful. My tuition reimbursement, my student loan repayment assistance. There's a lot more that goes into it than just the number on the paper. So if you're looking at an offer from anybody, you want to look at all of those things as well. What are your benefits like? What's your vacation time like? Do they pay for conferences? There's all kinds of things that really go into an offer more so than just that baseline salary number.
Yeah, absolutely. Really great point, Shannon. You know, at specialty care, we offer things like 25 days of paid time off for perfusion starting out. student loan reimbursement for up to 4 years, money to attend seminars, things like that. So I think that's really important to consider too when you're looking at the offer. It's a total compensation package, a total rewards package. And that's really a good way of thinking about it. In addition to the salary that you're offered, it's all of those other perks too. Great. And we have another question.
Wonderful.
Can you mention a few more commonly asked theoretical clinical questions to new graduates? I think during the interview process is most likely what they're talking about. I think that's a great question.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I wouldn't be too worried about an interviewer nailing you with knowledge-based questions during your interview, especially if they know that you're a new grad. I would hope and think that they would focus more on them asking you maybe cases that you've seen, a difficult situation. Was there a time maybe that there was, sometimes in the OR it can be a little tense. Was there a tense moment in the OR? How did you handle that? How do you react under pressure? If somebody's if it's a high intensity pressurized room and a surgeon isn't particularly happy, they may ask you something like that. How do you handle pressure? They may ask you different devices that you've worked with, different delivery systems, maybe the different types of equipment that you've worked. Do you use a Terumo pump? Do you use a Sarin pump? What have you seen in terms of just different techniques? They may ask you questions like that, but in terms of a knowledge-based clinical question, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. But what I can say is I have been in interview situations in the past where somebody has asked me a question and I honestly didn't know the answer to it. And I think the first thing I could think to do was just say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. And I'm embarrassed because I really should know the answer to that. And I owned up to it. It was something that I should have known going into this interview. It was something that I should have researched more. And I said, you know what, that's my fault. And I think that showed a lot about who I am, in that I wasn't sure. I can openly admit to that, but I'm also always going to be willing to go find out. So if they ask you a knowledge-based question and you don't know, don't be afraid to say, I don't know, but you know what? I'm going to find out the next time somebody asks me that, I have the answer right away. Does that answer your question? Can you up-like it if that helps? Okay, great.
Thanks, Shannon. And I think you bring up a really great point. So in a lot of cases, you're going to have an initial phone screen with a recruiter like myself or Courtney, or, a hospital-based recruiter. And then typically with a chief perfusionist or a clinical manager, there'll be another conversation there. And you're going to get asked some of these same questions. Typically the first questions you want to discuss with a recruiter are how many cases that you've pumped, types of cases, types of equipment that you've used. Have you sat ECMO? Have you been, have you observed ECMO, had those opportunities? How many more rotations you have, where those rotations are. Are you interested in adults and peds, or just adults or peds? What state do you want to live in? What city do you want to live in? Have you thought about a salary range? Those are going to be some of the basic first questions that you're going to get out of the way during the phone screen. Some of that information may be asked again by the clinical managers in those teams. And then, like Shannon mentioned, the questions that you're going to be asked in the interview, the in-person interview with the team, are going to probably be more behavioral based. Can you tell me about a time? And in those questions, the way you want to respond is that you want to give them a situation, the action, and the result. When you have those types of questions, they're going to be more behavioral based versus theoretical or clinical based. They're going to ask about the cases. They're going to ask about some of the techniques and things that you've done, as Shannon has mentioned, but they're really trying to get a feel for how you react under pressure, kind of how you think, and those types of things too. And they also know, and everybody knows this going in, that everybody's a little bit nervous during the interview. So just know that going in, they understand, and they're really excited to meet you because you're going to help fill a need that they have. And that's really important to know too.
Anybody have any other questions?
Saw somebody raise their hand. I think Joy had raised his hand. Oh, Courtney raised her hand too. I think Joy,
Yeah.
Joy, did you raise your hand? If there's any more questions, feel free to type them in the box.
So, you know, and if you're more comfortable asking via anonymous attendee, that's fine too. Use this to your advantage. I mean, it's to be able, if I had the opportunity to ask HR professionals questions anonymously before I interview, that would be great.
Yes, here is your chance to ask all of those questions that you've always wanted to before you go in an interview.
You can type in the Q&A or use the chat box as well.
Okay, well, if there aren't any more questions, and if there are, go ahead and feel free to type them in. We just want to wrap up again by thanking everybody for attending this webinar. We'll be following up with an email with our contact information so that you can reach out to us with any questions that you have in terms of recruitment, finishing out your clinical rotations, questions that you might have for Shannon, and we'll make sure to send that email out tomorrow to everybody to go ahead and to follow up so that you have all of that information. We really appreciate you taking your time. Oh, and you know, and before we wrap up, that's a really great question. Is it appropriate to ask how the position became available? Yes. I always felt, even myself, if I was interviewing for a position, you know, I did want to know why there was this vacancy. And I think, you know, you can approach it from the way and just saying, you know, may I ask why you're hiring for this position, or why this position's vacant, you know, that type of thing. And I think it's really good to ask that too, because that shows that you're concerned about the team. You know, why is this position vacant? And I think that just helps you have a better understanding of the hospital, the team, and the possible account, and gives you the information that you might be looking for. I've always felt that was appropriate, and I have candidates that ask me that too during the phone screen process, and that is